Alright, so what I want to show in this video is how to add site texture. Now, adding a site texture would color in your surface so that you can see where your grass areas are and your asphalt and your concrete areas are. And by doing this, when you export this out for SiteVision, you'll be able to see your surface with the colors that represent the information in the site textures that you're showing. The actual texture won't export out, but you'll at least have the color so that when you see it in SiteVision, your surface will be modeled with different colors. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Surfaces tab, and we have this tool called Surface Texture. Right now I'm going to pick the finished ground surface because that's where I want to apply the texture to. And the first texture that I'll go ahead and create will be the asphalt roadway. So I'm just going to put in asphalt road, and I'm going to create a new layer. And what I'm going to do with this layer is I'm just going to call it, we'll call it SUF for surface dash texture, and I'm going to protect it, and I'm going to put it in a new group, and that new group is going to be called surface texture. So I'm going to select in there. So we'll just call this surface texture. All right, I'm going to close this, and we'll close this. And now let me go back to surface texture, and let's try that one more time. So finish ground, and we'll call this asphalt. I think I closed one too many times. We'll just call it asphalt paving. And then the layer, which we should have. So I'm just going to come in here and find it. Should be right there, surface texture. And now we need to add a material. So if I click on new here, what this does is opens our material site improvement manager. And that's also found up here. Now this is primarily used in the takeoff process of using Trimble Business Center. But I'm going to show you how we can use it here for our textures. So under materials, we have to define and create a material. So I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to create a new category. And this first category will be paving textures. Okay. Then I'm going to be able to just left click out of that to accept it or press enter. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to create a new paving texture material. I'm going to choose area, and I'm just going to choose this to square foot or square yard. This really doesn't matter because in this particular case, we're not using it for the purpose of doing a takeoff. We're just using it to color or render our surface. Down here, we can choose a color. So my asphalt pavement area, I'm going to make it a dark, kind of a dark color. So let's make it, let's go dark gray, or let's just go gray because that's a little bit darker than dark gray. I'm going to change my scale to 1 for my horizontal and vertical. Now in the texture, you can see here we can apply a texture to it. Now if I click on this ellipse button, what this does is it goes out and asks you to find a particular texture. Now you'll see that I've got a bunch of swatches or palettes. Now one of the things that you can do, and I'll show you, is I'm going to go into my Chrome. So I'm going to go to Google, and in Google what you can do is you can type in something like grass texture. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for that grass texture. And if you go to images, what you can do is you can basically right click on any one of these images, save that image as a JPEG, and it will, or GIF in this case it's JPEG, but save it as a JPEG file. Now I have a folder that I store all these in, which is under my standards called materials. And you'll see that I've got some riprap, I've got some crushed aggregate, I've got some asphalt. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to pick this asphalt JPEG. And you can see I got a couple different ones, so maybe I want to use this one or this one. I'm going to click that one, I'm going to click OK. And then instead of hitting close, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to change this to asphalt pavement. Then I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to say new texture, and we're going to call this concrete. Right? So we may have brushed concrete or smooth concrete, whatever it happens to be. And this one I'm going to change the color to a light gray. And we're going to use the texture that I have, which is this brushed concrete. And I'm going to set the scale to 1. Okay. And then I'm going to come up here and we will go ahead and we'll do another one. And let's call this one gravel. And then for this one, let's make that a slightly, let's go dark gray with that. And then the texture for this one will be the crushed aggregate that we have. And then I'm just going to do 1 and 1. And then let's do one more. Instead of paving textures, let's go ahead and do something called landscape. And then I'm going to right click and create a new landscape material. In this case, we'll go ahead and make it medium green. And I'm going to choose my grass color that I have, my grass swatch. You can see you can do water as well. And I'm just going to come in here and set this to 1 to 1 as well. So now I've got my textures. Okay, let me make sure I come up here and call this, we'll call this sod or just grass area. Okay, and then I'm going to close, and now I'm ready to apply my texture. So if I do the grass areas first, actually let's do the pavement areas first. I'm going to click on this, and I'll come over here and I'm going to pick in this road. So now you're going to notice that everything is all the solid color. It didn't, stay within this road area. The reason for that is that I've got these lines here, and these lines that are my break lines that make up, my surface. If we select them, so let me go and turn on, or let's toggle that surface off for a second. If I select them and we take a look at them, and we look at the properties, you'll see that their surface is surface sharp. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select them all. Let me go, actually, I don't want to select everything because it's picking up those. So I'm going to go to my home tab. I'm going to select by layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick my building, my curbing for top back, my dumpster pad, my propane, my pump island, and my sidewalk. Okay. And what I'm going to do now is you'll see under my properties, so if I close this, I have all those objects selected. They're all the same object. They're all the same line string. If you select these other objects that aren't line strings, you won't be able to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to surface sharpness, and I'm going to change this to surface sharp and texture boundary. So when I do that, and I toggle my surface back on, you'll see that now these green areas are no longer shaded gray. All right, now there's some areas that did get shaded, and that's because I've got lines that if I turn on my break lines, I've got these lines which are also boundaries. And if I pick that line string and we look at the properties, you can see here that it's also sharp. So I'm going to make that sharp and texture boundary. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to pick this line string. We'll make that sharp and texture. And now you'll see that I don't flood this area with my asphalt pavement. Okay. Now it is going over here. So what I need to do is I need to come back into my surface. I need to add a break line. And I'm going to add that break line as a sharp and textured boundary to the finished ground. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to pick this point here. And we'll go ahead and we'll put in that point there. And you can see that it shades and I'm blocking it from flooding out into this other area. Okay. So you also notice that it's a little light, and that's because my surface properties, my transparency is set to 75. If I knock that down to like 10, you'll see that now I actually can see a little bit of more of the actual texture. Okay. So if I go back up to my surface texture and we come in here and we call this grass, and then I choose that grass area, now I can come in here and start putting in the grass area. So when I do that, you'll see that it floods in that area in there. You'll see that it actually did flood in my sidewalk, so I'm going to have to close that boundary as well. If I come down here, I can pick on this point. You'll see that it floods in all of that. So basically what that's telling me is I've got some areas that my lines don't completely connect. So I know that one area is down here. You can see that there's a, kind of a gap there, so it's flooding out. So what I can do in this case is do the same things. I can add a break line, make it sharp and textured boundary. And then I can pick here, we can pick there, and then we can pick down here, and that closes off that section as well. Okay. So now I can come in and let's go ahead and grab my surface texture. Let's go ahead and apply the concrete. So I'm going to pick concrete. We'll call this concrete. And then my text location will be here. So it floods that in. Then this here is probably the same thing. We'll flood that in with concrete. Just picking in these areas because I've bounded those break lines. And then I also will probably want to do this curb and gutter. So if I do the curb and gutter, you can see I can do the face, right? So now I'm picking up the face of curb and gutter. And you'll want to do that over in these areas as well. So I'm just kind of telling it where I want it to flood. And it's applying that texture to my surface. Okay, so I got concrete sidewalk. Okay, up in here, you can see that it flooded that whole area, and I've got a red flag. That tells me that I have 2 site improvements there. So I'm going to undo, and what I'm going to have to do is figure out how to close this this line here. Maybe see, it's got to be open somewhere. So I'll have to find that and figure out why that's flooding that area. But same thing here. I can come in and put in my texture for that one. And then I can do the gravel area in here. So because I put that in there and it's the wrong texture, what you can do is I can select that object and I can come over here and I can tell it that that's actually gravel. So now it's got a gravel pattern. Okay. So you can do the same thing. I can put the grass in over here, more of the grass area. And now I've got my surface textured. If I take that surface and we look at the properties, I can turn off the wireframe and then the vertices so they don't display in my plan view. And when I click OK, now you can see I have my surface with my surface textures. And when you export this to SiteVision, you'll get the color, not the texture, but the colors that are in the MSI manager that I set for the grass area, such as medium green, that will show up in SiteVision.